So how do we implement security? We put in encryption, especially on networks and storage and display of data. We increase the education and awareness, so all the staff knows what the policies are, they know our procedures, they know the risk, they understand how important it is for them to then follow the procedures and follow good security practices. We also should have policies as well as enforcement to ensure that only secure devices could then be connected to a network. And it's always good, of course, to have antivirus. So we make sure that a virus that's being spread around from one device to another, whether or not it's through email or USB, is hopefully detected and prevented from getting on that suspect system. Good practice says if you're not at your desk, you lock out your session. That means that somebody else can't sit down at your desk and maybe do something wrong. The inevitable send out an email from somebody else's account, for example. This is where having screen locks, a clear screen policy is often called, a clean desk policy, these can be really good ideas. And it's something that everybody can do. Everybody can try to help us then improve our overall security. One of the tools we've seen rolled out a lot in the last few years are RFID chips. Radio frequency identifiers are great for tracking, in many cases, inventory, tracking people. Quite simply, any object that has an RFID tag in it, we would be able to identify from a certain distance away, depending on whether or not it's an active or a passive type of device. The thing is, these do have limited range. So you have to be within a reader in order for them to actually work. But what's the chance of somebody through a crowded marketplace on a weekend walking around with a laptop bag over their arm and bouncing against a woman's purse or a gentleman's wallet as they walk by and picking up then, using their smartphone, those RFID signals that could give them, of course, access to that person's credit card information. Now, some tags just sit there quietly and they will only respond once they've been interrogated by the reader. So that tag could sit, for example, on the back of your shirt, where, if you buy a high-end shirt, then quite often if you turn over the tag at the back, you'll notice a little plastic strip with a black dot in it. That's actually an RFID chip. And that was used during the manufacturing and distribution to track that product and so on. But now that that product's been sold, that's not needed anymore. However, it doesn't get removed. But a passive tag means you have to be quite close to be able to read it. Whereas an active tag actually is broadcasting its signal out to anybody who's kind enough to respond to it. So where do we use RFID? We use a lot for inventory, asset management and tracking the inventory we have. We use it for authenticity, to make sure this is a genuine document or a genuine product. We use this a lot in the animal husbandry field these days, where if you have a racehorse that you're going to race, every horse and every purebred dog is then embedded with an RFID chip at birth. And the purpose of that is that we can track and make sure that it truly is the horse that they said they were running and not some other horse in its place. We have documents, we bury RFID chips into the document so we know that that's the authentic original version. We use these in process control, where, for example, one of the best examples of this is you could wear an RFID chip that as you walk through a building, it'll automatically turn on the lights and adjust the temperature to the comfort levels you want. That's a type of process control, for example. And of course, we use these a lot in access control through things like proximity cards that you have to hold up to a reader to be able to get into a building. So what are the risks associated with RFID? Well, obviously privacy. If a person can capture information on your credit card numbers or the RFID chip on your passport, are they able to gain access to your private information? The question always is, if I'm broadcasting something out, then that could be data is also being captured that we didn't really want to be shared. So the risk here of data leakage. This is a problem, for example, a person who's say a law enforcement officer who's working undercover. One of the problems these days is that there's so many different ways to track a person, for example, their cell phone and so on, that when we have things like RFID, it can actually disclose where a person is, which of course, in the case of, say, an undercover officer, could be rather dangerous actually. The risk, of course, always is process errors. If we're using these to drive a process, what's the problem if somebody makes a small mistake in programming? Well, that process is going to error out. So how do we prevent this? Well, have good usage policies. Policies that state the conditions under which RFID is going to be used, as well as make sure those policies are communicated to all affected staff as well. We put in operational and processing controls to try to make sure that a process executes correctly and that RFID allows us to track the activity of that process right through then the organization. And of course, we put in place technical controls to protect our devices and so on as well. So we know if a device was to be, say, lost or stolen.